problem that a lot of people run into, and that's the question I hope to help you guys answer here today. So just what are foreign comics? There's plenty of words you can use to describe foreign comics. They're unique, they're beautiful, they're interesting, they're frustrating, and a lot more words you can use to describe them. But one word you should not use to describe them is reprints, although there is a small but vocal minority among collectors who insist on doing so. When a comic is printed for the first time in another country, there's always some differences, even if the language is still English. Usually translation is required though, and ads are removed or replaced, indica text can be changed, cover information is changed, and so on. So if a country is making all these changes to the comic and they haven't printed the comic before, what exactly are they reprinting? And that's why these are first editions and not reprints. Now when a country does reprint its own material, then yes, those are going to be reprints obviously, but something printed for the first time in another country cannot by definition be a reprint. And most of us who collect foreign editions agree on this. These are all unique pieces of history, each one unique to the country that produced it, and they should be treated and respected as such. Now some comics were printed in one country and then sold in another, and that has caused a little debate in the foreign comic community around the different price variants, the UK pences, the Australian price variants, and the Canadian price variants. These were largely printed in the United States and then shipped to those countries, and this didn't happen just in the US. Many other countries shared printing duties between themselves over time, resulting in a lot of comics out there being printed in one place, but only sold in another place. What most of us newer collectors like myself have come to agree on in the foreign community is that the place of distribution is what matters. If I needed a passport to buy it, it's a foreign edition. You know, it doesn't really matter where it was printed. If you needed a passport, that really is the easy litmus test to apply to. But I do want to cover the different opinions around the price variants because both opinions are held pretty strongly and they seem to be generally divided among people who've been doing this for a while, you know, some of them 5, 10 years or more, and those of us newer to the community like myself, I've been in it 3 years. Now, 3 years may seem like a lot of time to some people, but in the foreign community, again, there's like the original group that have been collecting them for 5 or 10 years or more. And that original group for a long time was pretty small. You know, I estimate their size around 150 to 200 people. Up till about 5 years ago is pretty much all the people in the United States that were collecting foreign comics. And I think that's a pretty fair number. They did have a lot of discussions over the years among themselves on different ways to classify these and what categories they fell under, and a lot of those discussions took place on the CGC forums. Many of the discussions, they get a little contentious in the back and forth, but just about all of them resulted in that group forming a consensus of their opinions around each issue, and that consensus was then accepted and used by the foreign community. This was largely due in part to the relative small size of the community and the fact that no new collectors were entering the foreign comic market in any sizable numbers. Just a few new collectors every year or so who discovered them and liked them. So their opinions really weren't challenged a lot by anyone for years, and they all got used to these opinions being accepted. Now you fast forward to about 4 or 5 years ago when the comic book market started to see significant gains from what a lot of people call the MCU effect. Brought a lot of new people into the world of foreign comic, or the world of comic books, and by extension, a percentage of those also started collecting foreign comics. So this influx of new collectors to foreign comics meant that a group that may have been around 200 people for years was now likely 10 times that size, if not bigger. What that did, it brought a lot of new opinions into the community, including my own. Now, I'm only speaking from my own experience here, and the more I learned about foreign comics, the more I wanted to talk about them and discuss them and take part in these discussions. And I joined in a lot of discussions online. Sometimes though, I did encounter an unwillingness to even discuss some of these topics, as I was told repeatedly by a few members of that group that these matters were already discussed for years, it was settled, many times with them conveying a sense of annoyance that I, a new guy or a newbie, as you'll see they call, would dare to question these people who had been doing this for years and years and their settled debates. And I'm not exaggerating at all. I've got a screenshot here to show you from one of the moderators of the main Facebook group where you can see how they reacted to that. So this was one of the topics I posted. You can see I said Canadian price variants are foreign editions, changed my mind. You know, one of those popular memes that's used. And this was a response I got from one of their moderators. He said, someone had said, you know, they're not. He said 1,000% correct. You see he's got the moderator tag. We've already debated these subjects ad nauseum back in the day. Not surprised to see newbies bringing it back up. However, the case is closed. Pence and price variants are not foreign editions. So that gives you a little bit, you know, a sense of how some of these people who've been collecting for a while kind of responded to newer people, and they're wanting to say, hey, let's have these discussions. We got our viewpoints we want to present. And, you know, I told them that. I was like, you mean new collector opinions on this mean nothing, and so on. So you do run into that a little bit. As you can imagine, nobody likes being told their opinions don't matter or that they aren't as important as other opinions. I always tried to approach each situation with respect, but sometimes the same wasn't always given in return. So a lot of us new collectors wanted to have these discussions, many times with new insights or reasoning or logic, but we were being shut down by a few people and told these matters were settled. One of my favorite sayings is the only constant is change. And unfortunately, not everyone agrees with that, which has led to situations where some people just don't want to take parts in these discussions, or they just ban people from groups who don't, for lack of a better term, kiss the ring, you know, or those who feel their opinions are more valuable than mine and other new collectors. You'll find with me, I'm always open to any discussion around foreign comics, and whether I agree with the premise or not, I'm always going to treat you with respect during the discussion. It is just unfortunate that a few others don't feel that same way. So that original group decided that price variants were not foreign editions because they were printed with the original American run. And I can understand that view, I just don't agree with it, as many comics are not printed in the country where they were distributed in. In the interest of fairness though, I want to give you both views of this issue, and then you can decide for yourself, rather than try to tell you this is a settled matter that, you know, isn't up for debate. So the main difference is they largely believe the place of production is what is important when classifying the price variants, not the place of distribution. I, along with most of the other newer collectors, we believe the opposite. It's the place of distribution is what is important, not the place of printing, because a lot of countries shared printing duties. And even though the American ones were printed right alongside the price variants, at the same time, they don't apply that same standard to any other printing locations, just the American location. I've always believed that price variants are a subset within foreign editions, where their positions seemed to be it had to be either one or the other, and they can't be both, and they decided they aren't foreign editions. Now, I only say all that to show you the good and the bad in the community, so you guys are fully informed and you don't run into maybe some of the same, you know, situations I did. What I can say is that the overall community around foreign comics is by far very good and full of great people who love to have discussions about these and talk about them and, you know, work with each other. Very welcoming and friendly. So don't be afraid to have conversations about these things in the community. Just realize sometimes those discussions aren't always going to be met welcomingly like most of us will. Now, I do want to emphasize, I'm not trying to say that anyone who's collected these for a while is like that. There are a lot of original collectors who don't fit into that category, and I have great discussions with, and they've taught me a lot, and we work together very well. It's just a few people that I do want to make you aware of, you know, just to give you a fair warning as you're entering the market. All right, so as an example of those different printing locations, I'm going to show you this here. This is the Thor 165, first appearance of him. Now this is a German edition. Hit Comics is, everyone accepts it as a German comic. It's printed in German, but this was printed, as you see here, in Italy. You got your pointer? Oh, yeah. So this, as you see down there, printed in Italy. But nobody is trying to call this an Italian comic. So, oh, thanks. So why they insist the price variants are American comics, they don't insist this is an Italian comic. I prefer consistency. I apply the same standards to everything instead of, you know, picking and choosing different ones. So again, just an example, where it's printed really doesn't matter as much, it's where it's distributed. Now, countries too, they would make a lot of changes to comics, as I covered a little bit, to show why these aren't reprints and they're additions. And we'll look at some of those changes now. Some of them are a little drastic, some of them are more minor. But this is the first one. This is from Greece. This is Amazing Spider-Man 364. This is a Spider-Man story involving the Shocker, as you see the villain there, who you might be familiar with. What's odd with this, though, is in Greek, the name Shocker literally translates to vibrator. So instead of changing it to something more family-friendly, a Greek translator by the name of Vasilis decided to leave it in. There was reportedly even a discussion between him and the editor before deciding to let this go to print, and they still gave it the green light.
Wow.
So, now remember also, this is before the age of the internet, really. And it's highly likely that Marvel wasn't doing due diligence and following up to make sure these were done correctly. You know, they weren't sending people there to check them out. And the publishers, in their defense, they probably figured no one outside of Greece would ever see this or notice it. So, you have this Greek Spidey issue being a pretty clear example that these are not reprints, as that never appeared in American comics, obviously, with the Shocker having that name. So that's the first edition in Greece, and it should be treated as such. It's obviously unique. And again, most of the community, to be fair, does consider it that way. Not every example is quite as stark as that one, and they're different from country to country. There's no standard used. Every country pretty much did what they wanted with these. And many times they would combine different issues and different series into one issue, creating something that didn't happen before, like this one here. This is Thor number 5 from Italy. It uses one of the standard Avengers covers, but what is inside here, you have Avengers number 1, first issue there, that's the splash panel from page 1. As well, they combine multiple issues, you have Hulk number 1 inside it as well. So you see there, it created something unique. Again, what are they reprinting here? Because this comic never appeared like that in America with that cover. You also have a lot of times where they give you something brand new in the content itself, either by changing panels for many reasons, including censorship. As you can see here, this, a lot of people recognize the Turtles, but what I want to point out, they are not ninjas here, they are hero turtles. Now this took place in the UK and a few other countries, but it started from a campaign by parents because they were upset that movie stores were renting unrated videos to kids. And that just blossomed and got bigger and bigger than anyone imagined until it had really far-reaching consequences like this, to where they couldn't use the term ninja, and they couldn't use nunchucks. See, Mike's just got an empty fist there. They had to actually just paintbrush his nunchucks out of his hand, so he's just sitting there like this. So, you know, you get some really cool examples like that that you just don't see in American comics, and it gives you something really cool for variants to collect as well. Now in Norway, Daredevil is second in popularity only to Spider-Man, who is pretty much the most popular character worldwide. Spidey's always number 1, but Daredevil is usually not number 2, but in Norway he was. The Born Again storyline in Norway was published in Demonen issues 1 through 4, but Scandinavian readers were not really familiar with the relationship between Matt Murdock and some of his girlfriends that American readers were, as a lot of the stories dealing with those weren't printed in Norway. And Norway didn't want the readers confused with these elements prominent in the Born Again storyline. So what they did is they decided to create this issue, which is a prologue to the Born Again story arc. It kind of brings the readers up to speed on everything they needed to know. And this is a 20-page issue that is actually created from panels across 9 different Daredevil issues that they did just for Norway. And they called it Deadly or Mortal Sense, depending on your translation. This content is original to Norway. It doesn't exist anywhere else. You can find a really good video about the subject from a guy named Morton. He is pretty much one of the best experts in the world on Nordic comics. He has a Talking Foreign channel on YouTube. There's his ad there. So you can always go back in the video and pull that up. But he does a really good video explaining how they did that issue and more of the details around it if you're interested. In Italy, they removed a kiss from Superman and Lois, as you see here. They just made him back up a little bit. And they also made Bizarro a little less scary. They gave more of a human earth tone. Also notice they took the S off the chest. So you have minor changes like this too, where who knows why they did it at the time. Maybe the editor just didn't like it. Maybe in some countries it was political pressure to change something, so you have a lot of changes like that as well. In France, you have the original here, where they had Colossus snapping the neck of Riptide, and in France they're like, nope, that's too violent, we're just taking that out. So that whole section of the comic just doesn't exist in the French edition. So again, some of the examples of the edits they made to these and changes to make them unique first editions to those countries. You also have where they created their own non-canon stories for various reasons, like in the Daredevil we showed. The most famous though is probably these, the La Prensa issues from Jose Duran in Mexico. And he really just didn't like it when they killed Gwen Stacy. So he decided, I'm just gonna start writing my own stories where Gwen lived. And he did so for several issues. This is the most famous one where Peter and Gwen got married. You also have some really crazy examples, like from the 70s when Marvel was facing bankruptcy. And they were basically just selling licenses to anyone who would buy them. It's a lot different dynamic than it is nowadays with what Marvel's valued at. But that resulted in the only officially licensed Marvel porn there is in Japan. These are Marvel licensed, they're adult magazines. In the middle of 10 different issues from the 70s, they have Spider-Man stories. So this is one of the more tame covers I can show here. You can't even touch one of these right now unless you get really lucky for less than $200. They're really starting to get noticed by the market. But the long-term potential, I think, on these is great considering, again, it's the only official Marvel porn out there. And as more people become aware, there's gonna be a lot of collectors going after them. Now, one great aspect of foreign editions is the wide range of options. When you're collecting American comics, you really just have a couple options. If you want Wolverine's first appearance, you're gonna get a Hulk 180, Then your choices are, do you want it raw or graded, and then what condition, and that's about it for your options. With foreign editions, you have so many options to pick from, and that can seem a little overwhelming at first, but it doesn't take too long to find your way, and it's a lot of fun learning about them while you do. Now, the best part of foreign editions might be in something that just really doesn't exist in the American market, and that is the discovery aspect. We're always finding new keys and comics we didn't even know existed before in the foreign market, and just the odds alone of all the unknowns there still are means there's a lot more still to be found. I wouldn't even be surprised really if there's publishers we haven't discovered yet. That's how much of the Wild West aspect exists in the foreign market. What that does mean, that amount of discovery means research can be a major part of foreign comics, and we'll talk more about that later. But one of the most interesting early methods of research I want to mention was used in the foreign comic community early, was where they would go on message boards in other countries, and not even necessarily comic ones, just general chat boards, and they would post bounties. They would say, hey, if you can give me a picture of this Spider-Man 300 cover in your country, if it exists, we'll give you $20 just for the picture. And then they knew, if there was one to chase or not, and things from that. And that's probably still happening on some boards today, again, because there's still a lot of unknowns. All right, now let's talk about the investment part of foreign comics. So a disclaimer first, I am not a professional financial advisor. I do not have any professional financial training. All my opinions stated during this entire panel are just that, my opinions. You should always consult a financial professional before making any financial decisions, and that is not me. All right. So foreign comics are something I really enjoy collecting and learning about, and that really helps. But the main reason I'm in the foreign comic market is for the investment part of it. The potential that exists with these foreign editions is so much greater than the potential that exists in the American comics, or really any other collectible market for that matter. When it comes to investing, everyone wants to be in early. And right now, with foreign comics, now is early, but soon it's not going to be anymore. There's currently a window with foreign comics, and granted it did used to be a much bigger window, but now is when it is, and it's still very early when you're comparing the market to the rarity and how undervalued they are. So let's compare the foreign market to a nearly identical subset of the American market, and that's the newsstand editions. Newsstands, until about 5 years ago, they were pretty much shunned, just like a lot of people still are with foreign editions. People didn't want them, they would pay less for them, but all it took for the newsstands to increase in value like they did was simply an increase in awareness among the collectors. That's it. Once enough collectors learned how much more rare they were and started chasing them, the market naturally caught up to the supply and demand, where you now see newsstand editions selling for up to 10 times or more the price of the American counterpart. And the foreign market right now is nearly identical to the early stages of the newsstands editions when they were going through that 5 years ago. And we're watching history repeat itself. We just saw Heritage hold their first all-foreign comic auction in the fall. Comic Connect had one in March, and we covered those in the panel yesterday. Comic Connect already has another one scheduled for August. We see other auction houses starting to focus on foreign editions. Both CGC and CBCS have made multiple posts about their focus on foreign editions just this year. And you have panels like this one and the one yesterday starting to happen. All of this, in my opinion, is leading to that critical moment in the market when the demand is going to exceed the supply. And my opinion, again, is that it's going to happen very quickly and very drastically when it does, due to several factors I'll go over now. All right, so let's talk about the foreign comic market supply. And I'm going to use Spider-Man 300 as an example because everyone knows it. So let's just say there's 100 of them available in the American market on eBay and other sites. Just to use an easy number, I'm sure there's more than that. But someone could come in the market today, and if they had the money, they could buy all 100 of those copies up. And tomorrow, there would be another 100 copies up on all those sites because that's how many are out there. And that could happen many, many times because of how many people would sell them if they started to see the market go up from getting wiped out like that. So it would take a lot of both money and time to exhaust the supply if you even could. Now we'll look at the most popular foreign edition of Spider-Man 300, which is probably from Italy here. As you can see, many collectors, including myself, like this more than the American cover. We like that all black. Very hard to get in high grade, you know, these were red heavy. And this arguably might be the most widely collected foreign edition out there just because of its popularity. So let's say you can find 20 of these ones online. Now that would be significant for any foreign key, but with this specific one, if you did enough searching, maybe you could. Most foreign keys at any time are gonna have less than 5 copies available online, just for a comparison. But let's say you find 20 of these and you go and buy them all up. The next day, the market is not going to be restocked with 20 copies. You might see 5 or 10 in the few days after that, after they were sold, and maybe even, you know, another 5 after those sell, and that might happen a couple times, but then that's going to be about it, other than the odd ones trickling in over time. The foreign market doesn't have nearly the supply line available to accommodate a sustained increase in buying like the American market does. And I believe that when it does get to that tipping point, it's going to happen very fast and very drastically because of how small the overall supply is, and how rare these keys are in comparison to the American market. Now you also have to remember, these weren't printed on the print runs that American comics were. These were printed based on the population sizes of the country at the time and the popularity of comics there at the time, which was drastically smaller in just about every other country, especially through the 50s, 60s, and 70s when a lot of the more sought after keys were printed. Then you also have to consider, during those decades, comic books weren't really considered collectibles in other countries. Most were read and either thrown away or cut up or put on walls or colored on or otherwise destroyed beyond any real value. Also, America was by far the largest market for comics as well, especially before 1980. So print runs here were going to be much larger than just a direct population comparison to other countries. So you have foreign edition print runs right off the bat, they're gonna be far less than the American run, just from a number standpoint. Then you add to that the opinion that's becoming more prevalent every day in other countries, and that is that they wanna keep these foreign editions in their home countries. Leading some people, they're even going out and buying up what they can so they don't get shipped, not just to the US, but to other countries out there. There's a lot of pride growing around these issues, and rightfully so in many cases with how beautiful some of the foreign editions are, but that mindset is making it very hard to get some of these. Now, all these factors together show just how rare these foreign editions really are, and how few really wind up being available here in the US. Also gives you an idea of potentially how quickly they are going to dry up once the market becomes fully aware of them, making them that much more difficult, and by extension, likely much more expensive to obtain. Both the CGC and CBCS population reports back this up too, with just about every foreign key out there having just single digits graded. Other than your major cover sets, which we're about to talk about in a minute. Now that will change over time, but just about all of them, in my opinion, are gonna stay in double digits. I don't see hardly any, maybe like this one might break triple digits total graded, but that's gonna be the exception, not the norm. Let's look at an example of what happened just a couple months ago on my Whatnot live sale, which I do every week, all foreign sales. I had this Italian edition of Detective Comics 362. It started at a $5 bid. Now the American cover, as you see here, doesn't quite pop like the Italian one does. And nothing at all against the original art, just between the two, I like this one better, and a lot of people agree with that. The American one has recent raw sales in the $5 to $15 range, which is about average for it. The Italian edition, starting at a $5 bid, went for $136 between two people that just really wanted it. And that wasn't a fluke, it was backed up about a month ago. I sold another one for $130 to another collector. So it really goes back to the rarity, how many copies of American Text 362 are out there. There's a lot, you can always find them pretty affordable. By comparison, I went again and looked on the websites today looking for this. I couldn't find more than 3 copies of the Italian one available. So that speaks again to the rarity of it. Now, some people are gonna say, well, where's more examples like that? And there's a few, and I covered some in the panel yesterday, but you have to realize if there's hundreds of examples like this in the market, then the market's gonna be mostly caught up to where the Americans are, and it's not gonna be early, and we're not gonna be in here talking about the opportunity that exists today. These are the early examples you start to see, much like you started to see when the newsstands, when they first started out selling the American ones, and there was only a few examples of it at the time. A very important part to remember with foreign editions is the condition. It's becoming a pretty common saying in foreign editions that mid-grade is high grade, and it really isn't an exaggeration.
Thank you.
You take all the factors into account that we just went over, and you'll start to understand why we say this. Excuse me. With American comics, grade really is everything. We're very grade dependent, and with only few exceptions, people don't want the low grade stuff. You have to completely abandon that mentality with foreign comics. When it comes to foreign editions, especially the bigger, older keys, just owning one first is the goal in any condition. And that can be a big win, like with some of my rare ones here, where there's just single digits known to exist. And then if you have an opportunity in the future to upgrade that condition, that's another big win. For a long time, the pride of my collection was a graded 1.0 Daredevil #1 from Mexico. And you just can't find that comic in a high grade without spending thousands if you find one. So you have to adopt a new way of thinking when it comes to what you might consider acceptable when it comes to the conditions. Now, of course, with the more recent stuff, like some of the Russian editions and stuff from the last 10 or 15 years, you can be much more critical of the grade because those were produced with being collectibles in mind. Just realize how much that doesn't apply the farther back you go, and even more so the farther back you go, that really doesn't apply. So low grades can and should be loved with foreign editions. So So knowing all that, where to start collecting? Well, the way just about everyone in foreign comics starts is with cover sets, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Here is an awesome cover set. This is for Daredevil 1. This is the La Prensa one I was just talking about from Mexico. And you see some of the different color treatments you get from different countries and some of the variations and how really awesome they look sitting by each other side by side. This one is probably my favorite overall cover set for foreign editions, and this is Hulk #1. You see, like, this one is the German one from Williams in the 70s with that orange fading to yellow background. You have the blue here from Newton in Australia. You got another blue in the Hebrew one here, some green variants, so, and even to the all-white background. So you get some really cool looks out of there that, again, you just can't get with the American stuff. Here we have Amazing Spider-Man #1. There is, again, a Newton from Australia. You have an E-ball from Brazil here. You have the Greek, so some cool ones there. Here we have Hulk 181, the second appearance of Wolverine. This one really has a nice variant from Spain here. As you see, they made Wolverine black and white, and collectors are really falling in love with that one. That has really saw some dramatic increases, especially over the last year. And if it's one you like, I would suggest not waiting on that one too long. This is Spider-Man 238, your first Hobgoblin appearance. A lot of people like to collect this one as it has a lot of options, and as you can see, all the different variations you get with the colors, they really do give it different looks, especially when you get into like some of these yellows from Italy here. Italy really did a great job selecting their yellows and reds, especially in the 60s and 70s, and it really just pops better than the American ones do. Here is Ghost Rider #1 with some different countries available to give you an idea. Here is your first Batgirl, Detective Comics 359, or Tech 359 as many call it. This is the same line from Italy that Batman I showed you sold for with the record. This they did a red background, which honestly, again, I like better than the original purple background because it just pops so much better. So, yeah, and you have some people starting to chase that now as they become aware of it. But again, you see some of the great color variations you get and that really unique look you get displaying them all side by side. Here is Tomb of Dracula 10, the first appearance of Blade from several countries. This one they stuck more with the blue background for most of them. You get a little bit of variation in the Danish one here with the white background, but you still get some cool ones there. Here is Tales of Suspense 39, your first Iron Man. This is a German one, actually a signed 9.2, which is just a ridiculous grade. As I mentioned before, these high grades, that's from the 70s, so getting anything in that above, you know, a 7 or 8 is really a huge win. You got a UK edition here and some other ones. Here we have Spider-Man 122. It's a popular cover a lot of people like with some different countries in there. We have the classic McFarlane Hulk 340 here. Now sometimes what they'll do is they won't just give different color backgrounds, is they'll flip it like they did with the Italian one here. See how they have a mirror image. So it gives you an even better view when you have them side by side like that, you know, these cool variations, and who knows why they flipped the cover. They felt like it, so they did it, and it gives you some cool cover sets like that. This is Moon Knight #1 from a few countries. Got some really good interpretations of that one there. Here you have a pretty big one, Amazing Spider-Man 361, your first Carnage. You can see again in this, they kept that white background consistent through most of them. You don't get a lot of color variations, a little bit of blue here, but still having them all side by side with all those different titles really gives you a really cool look for the cover sets. We have Batman Adventures 12 here, your first Harley Quinn. Some great sets there. Notice too, these are different sizes, so it wasn't required at all for the countries to keep them the same size. If they wanted to make them smaller or really smaller, they could do so, and sometimes they did so there. Here you got Batman 181, your first Poison Ivy. Now, as far as we know, this is a complete cover set, meaning we're not aware of any other countries that made this, But again, tomorrow, someone could find one, you know, from somewhere that we weren't aware of yet. But as it stands, this is a full set of Batman 181. Here we got X-Men 266, your first Gambit. Again, one of the countries just said, I'm gonna make it a little smaller here. We got the French one here, some cool ones. This one is a big one. This is Spider-Man 252, your first black suit really, a big key a lot of people like to collect, and you see all the options you have out there. If you want to chase a cover set like this, you definitely have a lot of options to do so. Again, they stay pretty consistent in the color with this one. Sometimes you'll get those really stark color variations, sometimes you won't. Again, there's really no rhyme or reason. The countries did what they liked in it. Here you have Walking Dead #1, that's more recent, but just to give you an idea, they're not all Marvel or DC, you do have independent comic options as well. You got Batman 251 here, the classic Neil Adams cover. This one they did a few different color treatments too. I especially like this orange one here, that just gives it a totally different look and pop, and think more of a like Joker feel with kind of a clown aspect. We have your giant size X-Men you can see from several countries there as well. This is the French one. I probably like that one the best because it's a Frazano cover. A lot of people think that's Jean Frazano, who's the most well-known in France, but that's actually his son, Thomas Frazano, did that, although a lot of people do attribute it to Jean. But they have very similar styles, so it is easy to confuse them. Here you got Marvel Special Edition #15, your first appearance of Shang-Chi. Here is Amazing Spider-Man 31 with some different countries in there as well. One of the countries, it's, I think the Spanish one there, gave it the white background treatment. You got Fantastic Four #48, that classic cover with some cool looks of it. This one here, the Hit Comics, that is really tough to get. It's tough finding any Hit Comics. Here you have, of course, your Star Wars #1. And again, some countries really took some liberties with it, giving it a purple background there, redrawing Luke, giving him green clothes. So you find cool things like this, and a lot of times you may not even spot those when you're buying it, but when you get it in your hand, you're like, oh wow, and you start comparing it, and you see some of these cool variations. We got one of the big ones here, Fantastic Four #1. This is a tough one to build. It's really hard to find some, especially like the Greeks. You have two versions of them. You got the Newton here from Australia, things like that. So that's a cool one as well you can collect. I do want to give a big thanks to Comics I Gathered on Instagram. They allowed me to use their pictures for all those covers that you see, and yes, those were all from one collector. So as you can see, some people have been doing this for a while, and they built some impressive collections. Here I want to show you one of them I got. This is probably my most loved cover set, even though it's not the most valuable, but this is from the personal collection of Bill Morrison. I was very blessed and honored to have him choose to let me do a live sale for him on Whatnot in November, where he sold his personal collection of comics he got when he was editor-in-chief at Bongo Comics. So it makes him not only pedigrees, it makes him file copies as well, which is almost unheard of in the foreign comic world. You just don't see pedigrees much. Although I do have one other example of it. This is a German pedigree. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the White Mountain pedigree. They were one of the very first pedigrees that CGC certified, but they're known by having this date stamp and check mark. But this actually comes with the original Batman mask that was distributed with it, which you just don't find these from anyone hardly. That's another one, you know, these are all in my personal collection because they're one-of-ones you just can't replace. But you do get some cool pedigrees like that. I also have what would be my rarest cover set here, and it's only 2 deep because it's a tough one to get. This is Strange Tales 109. The American cover I have here to show you, they did a color difference. This is from Jaffa in Australia. They're one of the main 4 publishers in Australia. Very tough to get. What makes this especially a key is it not only has Strange Tales 109, but it also has 110 and 111 inside. 110 is, of course, your first appearance of Doctor Strange and Wong. I tried for over a year to find a copy. Another one of this one finally showed up on eBay a couple weeks ago with like no notice. It ended at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. You know, it wasn't set up for success, but that was a really bad low grade, and that still went for 400 bucks. So you do have some really cool ones you can chase there. So if it's been a popular cover, chances are there's going to be multiple foreign editions for you to chase out there. And it doesn't even have to be a key, like the Tech 362 I showed. You know, some people are just building sets around that because they like the red one. All right. Just about all of us who collect foreign editions believe these are tremendously undervalued, and we're not out here trying to artificially inflate the market or manipulate or anything like that. We're just anticipating the market catching up to the rarity like they've done with the newsstands editions, like they're starting to do with the Canadian price variants and the Australian price variants and the Pence editions, which again, in my opinion, are all foreign editions. So it's not like there's no precedence for these. And I backed up that opinion with my wallet as well. I haven't bought an American comic in well over a year now, other than ones I like for my personal collection. I don't invest in American comics anymore. If it's for investment, I'm only getting into foreign editions. So that's a brief overview of cover sets. But cover sets aren't the only way to collect foreign editions, and maybe not even the best long-term potential for investment. That honor may belong to the inside of the comics where the true first appearance panels lie. Those are the panels where the actual history was made in canon, although the iconic covers that accompany many are part of the history and draw as well. When it comes to foreign editions, however, many times you will have those internal panels without the matching covers, like I showed you with the Thor 5 from Italy before with the Avengers 1 and Hulk 1 inside. This is the first issue from that same Thor run from Italy. Now this has Journey into Mystery 83, 84, and 85 inside it, all big ones, plus a little bit of Tales to Astonish, but again without the cover. Although I was able to identify the art from this cover last month as the Thor image from the cover of Silver Surfer number 4, where he's fighting Silver Surfer. As far as I could tell, that was a new discovery I made that no one had made that connection yet, but that's identical to the art with a few changes. Some of his knee pads are different, the hammer's a different color, but that's the same art from it. Now these are still largely ignored by even most of the foreign comic collectors, as the cover sets are just more fun to build and chase and display. And an internal panel, you know, in another language maybe you can't read, just doesn't have the same appeal to everyone. But what this means is you can get a lot of those bigger keys without the covers, even still for a fraction of what the foreign editions are selling for. Now this Thor 1 does have a little more value, as I told people where the cover was from, and a lot of Silver Surfer 4 fans are chasing it now. But the Thor 5 I showed you is largely ignored with the Avengers and Hulk inside. If either one of them had the matching covers, they'd probably cost, about 5 times more, if not more. So you can get those great panels at a fraction of the cost. Now some people ask, so are those going to be worth more than the covers are? Probably not, but the fact that you can still get them for a fraction of what the covers are, if they ever even get close to where the covers are, it's a much better investment for a long-term strategy. All right, finally, let's talk about maybe the most frustrating part of foreign editions, sourcing and searching for them. This can definitely be stressful at times, but it can also make success in that search that much sweeter. Excuse me. First, I want to say you're definitely going to need patience with these, especially, with shipping. I have a package shipped last spring from the UK I still haven't got. At this point, I'm probably not going to get it. It was probably lost on a boat, and that is a risk you take, with any shipment from another country. The exception in the area is DHL Express, and I'm not sponsored by them. I just like to use them. I always ask people if DHL Express is an option, as even their regular service, I get it within 2 weeks. Their Express, I get in 4 or 5 days from Italy regularly. So I always pay extra for them if that's an option. It's usually, 20 or 30 bucks more, maybe a little more depending on the country and the weight. But to me, that's worth it. You can decide for yourself if that's worth it to you. But also realize shipping is gonna be expensive to start from another country. Usually it's about 30 bucks or more for one comic, so you wanna get more than just one or two in a shipment if you can to help break up that shipping cost. Also realize 99% of people shipping comics from overseas, they don't use Geminis, and most of them don't even use bag and boards. You're just gonna have a raw comic thrown in a bubble mailer. So the condition you see on the picture may not be the condition you get it in. Now, finding some of these can be really challenging, like the Strange Tales I have, or the Oguri I'll tell you about in a little bit. And sometimes you can find a few available online through eBay and other sites, which eBay can be a great resource, and it's a good place to look for sold prices, but really it's not the only way or even the main way you should be searching for them, especially to start out. Your best overall source for information on foreign editions to start out is comics.org, or GCD as it's called by most, the Grand Comics Database. They are by no means a complete database on foreign editions, but they're the best that's out there for overall. Some countries, you'll just learn over time, have their own sites, like Italy has one that's more in-depth than GCD, but it's only Italian comics. So you'll start to use those over time as you learn more. But I'm still on GCD multiple times every day, looking stuff up. The community, though, around foreign editions really is amazing, and that should be your primary method of sourcing, especially early on while you're building relationships with people in other countries, unless you might have some of those already. Now, I'm gonna be a little biased towards my auctions, but every Tuesday on Whatnot, I do a sale at 9 o'clock Eastern, and it's all foreign comics. We call it our Foreign Comics Support Group. And we just get together and talk about foreign comics for an hour or two. I sell some. If they sell, great. If they don't, no worries. We're all having fun. So we are the first ever regular weekly all foreign comic sale on the internet, and we've been doing that for over a year now, almost a year and a half. Instagram is also a great community. There's a lot of people with some great foreign editions, like Comics I Gathered there I showed you. They post and talk about, and they love to engage in conversations and, see people coming into the industry. And you can find some for sale on there too. The main thing to remember when you're starting out with foreign editions is don't be afraid to ask other people in the community about purchases you're considering, especially bigger ones. None of us want to see someone get scammed for buying a comic that they were told was more rare than it was, or if it's a second or third print they thought was a first print, or anything like that. Just about all of us are willing to help out with price estimates or information on print runs, things like that if we have it, or even just opinions, so don't be afraid to ask around. You have to remember, we don't have the sales data that the American market has available, so the community is really important to finding your way early on. Now, another great resource are all the foreign versions of eBay. eBay, anything you see in .com is an American site, but eBay has several sites in other countries. And most of the time, all you gotta do is like Google eBay in Italy, and it's gonna bring it up for you. One way to tell if you're on the right site is to check the extension, like Italy is .it. Anything that ends in .it, you're on an Italian site. So, also some countries, if they don't have eBay, like Japan doesn't, but they have their own versions of it, that run. So it's a learning experience, you'll learn as you go. One thing to circle back to shipping real quick is to be careful on foreign auction sites. A lot of sellers only ship within their country, and that may not be prominent data you see in the sale. So you gotta message them, ask them if they've shipped to America, ask them if they protect the comic, things like that. Also, not every country offers the same protection for buyers that eBay does. So you do have to do more due diligence, and you don't wanna just click buy it now unless you really know what you're doing. But if you do that due diligence, you can really get some good deals on the foreign websites out there. And finally, a secret to searching for foreign comics that most don't consider, and that is typos. Again, this really doesn't exist with American comics because you don't have to worry about it, but you'd be surprised how many different ways, like the Spider-Man title, L'Uomo Ragno in Italy is spelled. I found at least 5 different typos on this. So be careful when you are searching, like eBay, if you type Rango, it'll automatically change it to Ragno a lot, and you have to find a little spot that says click here if you actually want to search Rango. So look for those and click them. you know, it takes a little patience, but again, you can find some that are entered wrong and not spelled correctly. They can be some really good under the radar deals where you get some amazing, amazing deals on. Well, I think that is a pretty good overview of foreign comics and how to start collecting them. I do want to emphasize there is so much more to foreign comics. I could really take any of those sections and talk for a couple hours on it, you know. But I just wanted to condense as much as I could to try to inform you about the overall scope of them the best I could, and hopefully I accomplished that. I do want to tell you how you can find me, Hotkey Comics on Instagram, whatnot, YouTube, Gmail. Anywhere you see the key, it's on fire, that's me. We're on several sites there. I also do pressing available, $10 per comic. I do a 24-hour cooldown to prevent reversion. All right. One thing that a lot of us have noticed is that, you know, you don't necessarily get hooked on foreign comics until you hold them. So I do have a couple here to pass around if you want to look at them. And then we are going to do the giveaway here, which I have the Miles Morales blind pack from Italy. You guys were here yesterday. Remember that? You want to see any of these? Good. All right, there you go. Check those out. Don't worry about any damage. You can see those were already damaged in transit because they didn't protect them from water damage, so they're just reader copies. So feel free to take a peek through them and all that. I do want to thank everyone in the community who helped me out with the pictures and information and things like that, like Morton and Comics I Gathered. I really can't overstate how amazing the community is. You know, I did want to warn you guys, just the few people you might run into, but just realize how small a portion they are of the community. I just ignore them, you know, and have lots of fun without them. So, all right, let's do the giveaway.
Go back there.
That is there. There we go. Got a little bit better bag today for it. What this is, not familiar. This is the first ever blind pack done from Italy by Panini. They did it for the Miles Morales movie release, you know, Spider-Verse #2. But they have the regular cover you see here. It's got text on the top, it's a regular cover. But they have 3 Virgin Chase covers in there as well. One of them's limited to only 500 copies. I have one of those there as an example. One of them's limited to only 50 copies, and then there is the 1-of-1. Now, I did remember today to bring gloves for it. So let's see who is going to get the win today, and if you get one of the Chase covers. I got a bag and board ready. These are very high gloss, that's why I had the gloves for them. All right, let's see who it is. I got plenty of other giveaways here as well, so all you guys are going to get something. 738. Nope, got one on the left.
Yes.
All right. 738, not you? It is you? All right, awesome. Congrats. Let's see if you got one of the rare Chase covers. Another glove right here. Good luck. Let's see what we got. See if we can get you one. Oh, you have the regular cover. Still a great one to get, but we didn't get one of the big Chase ones. But this is definitely a higher grade one, so a good submission candidate. I would bet that there are not going to be very many 9.8s of these because of how bad they are with fingerprints and how many people are not using gloves when they open them. So you definitely have one of the better ones on the market here to begin with. Get a piece of tape to close that up for you. Still a nice one to get. We're not sure what the print run was on these. I've been seeing the 1 in 500s, they seem to be pulled about 1 in 40, which would mean the print run's around 20,000. But we don't have official word from Panini yet, so there you go, congratulations. Oh, thank you. I got some more posters here as well. If you guys want some more of those, I'll show you what we got. We have a Miracle Man one today. One of those there. If guys see one you want, you can just say, so the only 3 in here, we don't need to do more drawing. We got a group one here as well. You guys are all welcome to these. Group poster there with some, is that Green Lantern? That wouldn't be Green Lantern, it's DC, but either way. We have Marvel Voices, Wakanda Forever. These are ones, again, I have an account with Penguin Random House, but I don't have an LCS, and they just send these to their accounts for people to put up in their LCS. So I just give them away, because my walls cannot hold that many comic posters. We have here Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants. Cool Storm one there. We got a Planet of the Apes one. Planet of the Apes fans. That one there. We got and a Wakanda one. So I guess we got 2 Black Panther ones. Oh no, that's a Shuri one. So there you go. So if you guys want any of those, you're welcome to them.
I would love that Wakanda.
This one here?
This one, yeah.
Absolutely. There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. Did you want any of those? Need the posters?
Oh, I got a blade one yesterday.
Okay, go with the
Yeah.
blade.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and then there's also, let's see, there's a Hunger in the Dusk, little mini promo one they gave me there. And what's this one? And a Star Trek one. So you guys are welcome to any of those. You can have more than one if you like. But any questions at all on the foreign editions or any kind? Yeah.
What is stopping people from going to other countries and just trying to pick them up at other countries' Comic-Cons?
I missed the first part.
What is stopping people from going to other countries' Comic-Cons to pick these comics up?
Sure, and some people are. You know, there's people who go on foreign comic sourcing trips, but it's not cheap. You know, you got the travel, you have the hotel, you have the cost of the comics, and by the time you figure all that in, any savings you get, you know, you might get a $100 comic here for 40 or 50 bucks there, but really where's, you know, there's not as much profit as some people might think. You really have to buy a lot if you go to other countries. I mean, you know, 300 or 400, a couple long boxes for to make it worthwhile. Unless you get really lucky, you know, if you find one of those Princess Spideys for $100, that pays for your trip, sure, but you can't really go there expecting that. So if you're doing it as, you're like, hey, I'm gonna do this and I need to make money doing it, I wouldn't approach it that way. But if you're like, hey, I got a vacation coming, and there's some comics maybe from this country I wanna go find, absolutely, you can plan the trip that way. You know, I just wouldn't do it as where the profit was required for the trip to be a success. You know, you may get lucky, but a lot of people in other countries, like I mentioned, they don't wanna let them leave. They're realizing what the values are, and they're starting to raise the prices. I don't even recommend when people go to other countries, if they're looking for deals, the comic shops are pretty much out the window unless you find a rare one. I tell them go to pawn shops, go to flea markets, you know, places like that. That's where you can still get some deals. Go up and ask them if they got a stack of comics, how much for the whole stack. You know, they're probably gonna be glad to get rid of them in most cases, and you never know what you might find in that stack. So from that aspect, you have better odds, but as you know, if you're just doing it to try to get good deals on comics, you might wind up spending about the same amount. Although you would have the foreign country experience with it, so. Any other questions? Or?
With the one you talked about, where the writer didn't like the fact when Stacy was killed, and he wrote like a couple of different series. Did they just like he wrote and printed or had an artist do just a separate run? Or?
He was the artist. That was Duran. So he drew all those himself. The unofficial word is he had permission from Marvel to do it, because at the end he said it was all a dream, is how he explained it away. But they're not part of Marvel canon for Spider-Man by any means. So, but yeah, he just basically took it upon himself, and he's considered one of the legends really in the comic community, Jose Duran out of Mexico. Yeah, I forget how many issues. It was like 30 or so, right in that range he did that for. And then, yep, he did the new art treatment. It's all a dream. Yeah.
So they were selling those alongside the ones that were coming from Marvel that were doing the regular continuity that we were seeing here in the States.
Right. Yeah, and it wasn't like the same month, but it was pretty close. Those were from I think the early '70s, which was right around when they were doing that. So yeah, yeah, he saw what Marvel sent him as the art, and he's like, I don't like Gwen dying, and so he started writing where she didn't, you know? And yeah, that was, you know, that's how countries did it back then. They just kind of did what they wanted with comics. There wasn't a lot of oversight. You gotta remember in the 70s how much financial trouble Marvel was in. They weren't chasing these people down to make sure they were following contracts. They were just happy to get a check. So they were facing bankruptcy for several years, you know, until Stan Lee got things turned around. Anything else, sir? I can answer questions about foreign comics all day, so. But yeah, you know, if you guys aren't familiar with Whatnot, it is a collectibles theme focused selling platform, and I've been on there for almost 2 years now with the foreign focus for about 1.5 years, and we do that every Tuesday at 9. So that's a lot of fun, and you know, a lot of stuff starts at just wherever we have the bid, and if it sells, great. If it doesn't, great too. You know, we have our support group, and we come in and talk about foreign comics. So there is one vendor here with foreign comics, and that's Bill Morrison. So make sure you give him a stop by if you haven't checked him out. He's got some really cool foreign Simpsons stuff in there. I just bought a couple more today. I bought some yesterday. You know, I keep going back for more. But he is an awesome guy to talk to as well. So other than that, I asked every table yesterday. Nobody had foreign comics other than Bill. So tough to get. But I really appreciate you guys coming. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Also, if you got any questions on what you see up here, you know, feel free.